Hello, and welcome to Episode 4 of Faith Unbound in Lycoming County, a podcast produced by United Churches of Lycoming County to inform our listeners and to the glory of God. I'm your host, Lou Kolb. I realize it's been a while since we brought you Episode 3, and there's a good reason for that. I've been wanting to do a program on the problem of human trafficking, so I invited Dawn Blanchard onto the show. Now, Dawn is a fellow board member of UCLC with me, and she serves on the Social Concerns Committee, and she's also quite involved in the fight against human trafficking. And Dawn had the brilliant idea to have several experts on the topic of human trafficking to ensure that we covered all aspects of it. That's why it took us a bit longer to finish the show, as with the multiple guests, we had to make sure we could get everyone in the same room at the same time. And we finally managed to accomplish that and have our conversation. As we'll discuss, human trafficking occurs when a human being, mostly but not always a young girl, is transported from place to place against her will and is forced to engage in various activities, usually sexual in nature, for someone's profit. It's sobering to think that this kind of evil is going on right under our noses, but it is. In fact, Route 15 is a particularly popular road for human trafficking. You may not find this the most uplifting of discussions, but I believe it's necessary. The more we know about the signs and indicators of human trafficking, the better we can protect our children, especially those who are most at risk. So, let's meet our guests. Starting with Dawn Blanchard, whom I know from, we both serve on the board of UCLC. Good morning, Dawn. Welcome to Faith Unbound in Lycoming County, and tell us a little bit about Dawn.
It's good to be here, and I am so thankful that the United Churches of Lycoming County find this important enough to make one of their podcasts. That's what we really would like everyone to do. I am with an organization called Born to Fly. It's international, and they would like to set up chapters in all locations to educate elementary, teens, and young adults on how to recognize a predator and how to act in a way to discourage them.
Well, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we get on with the broadcast. Ann Judd is here. You are also part of Born to Fly, correct?
Yes, and I got involved a couple years ago. Dawn invited me to a seminar in Lewisburg regarding human sex trafficking, and that's when I realized that this is something that I need to get involved with. And then since then we've gone to other numerous seminars, and we've also started Born to Fly camps here in Lycoming County.
Okay. Ann Michael is here representing a couple of organizations. International Justice Mission, is that the proper name?
That is correct. Go by the acronym IJM, and I lead the volunteer team here in Pennsylvania for IJM, and I'm also here today representing the Pennsylvania Anti-Human Trafficking Advocacy Work Group, which is an outgrowth of Act 105 from Pennsylvania, which was their human trafficking legislation that went into effect in the fall of 2014.
Okay. And last, certainly not least, Heather Schneider came up from Lewisburg, I think?
Correct, yes.
With Transitions. What is the full name of that organization?
Transitions of PA. We are the Comprehensive Crime Victim Center for Union, Snyder, and Northumberland counties. We work with Path 15 as well, which extends through Bradford, Lycoming County, Dauphin County, York County. So we're pretty comprehensive as far as our services for domestic violence, sexual assault are just our 3-county service area, but I am the lead trainer for human trafficking, and I cross the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, bringing education, awareness, and trainings on human trafficking.
I think it would be a good idea to start with a good working definition. So what is human trafficking? Who would like to tackle that?
A definition that I got from WAR, which is Women at Risk, out of Minnesota, is when a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age.
Okay, so these are people who are possibly abducted and coerced into doing things they would not usually do. Typically, sex, is that the only thing humans
No.
are trafficked for?
No, there's also labor trafficking. That's how our country divides the trafficking between labor and sex.
So this is, I think you could say, essentially slavery.
Yes.
Is that an accurate depiction
it is
of it?
considered modern day slavery.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what is the prime motivator? I would guess money.
Exactly. Between 5 to 6 years ago, when I started to become an educator, the net profit for this.
This is Heather speaking, by the way. We should mention that so
Sorry.
that people know
Yeah,
who is
I should
talking.
identify myself
Yeah, okay.
again. Yes, when I started to become involved in trafficking, one of the statistics that we used was it was a 34 billion annual profit, as far as what it was generating in the world as the fastest growing criminal enterprise. Today, it's 150 billion is the profit margin.
So with that kind of money available, naturally, people are going to be attracted to it.
Unfortunately, yes. And with this, when you're selling an individual for commercial sexual exploitation, you can sell that individual over and over and over and over again. Where when you're trafficking drugs, you can sell that drug once, you can sell a gun once, but these are mostly minor girls that we're talking about.
Well, since sex is part of the reason for it, I would think boys are maybe not as much as girls, but
They are involved, yes.
Yeah.
They do get lured into this life, and but 97%, according to the Department of Justice, are mostly minor girls. One of the things that I want to talk about is this is a global issue, but we have local communities that are being affected. And I think so many people have an idea of human trafficking based on what they see in the movies, and that's the Hollywood definition. And we see some of that in our area as far as individuals that are being trafficked into the U.S., but we're talking about these individuals that are trafficked within the U.S., which is 100,000 to 300,000 individuals are trafficked annually within the borders of the United States, and they're mostly minor girls for sex trafficking. So I don't want to minimize labor trafficking. However, most of the focus of the trainings and discussions that I'm involved in are related to sex trafficking, which we identify as commercial sexual exploitation. And this is when a person, and these are according to Department of Justice information, when a person is trafficked and they're being sold for sex acts in exchange for any item of value. And that item doesn't have to be money. It can be transportation, it can be shelter, it can be food, whatever the situation is. It can be a beverage. We've heard and had information that there was a father that was trafficking his 6-year-old son in exchange for a case of beer. And when the authorities got there and just realized what was happening and arrested this individual, he already had 6 cases of beer in his car. So anything of value, we see this in our area, and it pertains to family members, relatives that are trafficking other family members. And someone is acting, sometimes they'll be acting in the role of a guardian, and you'll hear a youngster say something about, well, I'm living with so-and-so, or I'm staying with so-and-so, or somebody has taken me in. And, or we're hearing individuals talk about, especially young girls, talk about older boyfriends and how they're, buying them things and taking them places and getting them into that life. Now, to prosecute force, fraud, and coercion doesn't have to be proven in a court of law to a minor, but they're still using those tactics, and they're still threatening, they're still abusing, they're still demeaning, they're still coercing these individuals, thinking that this is the only thing that they deserve, this is the only thing they're ever going to have, and nobody's going to come to help them.
Okay, I have one more question about the traffickers before we get more into the victims and what we can do. Those who deal in drugs and drug trafficking are often part of large groups or cartels, as they're often called, which are well armed, well equipped, possibly even well protected by officials who may be bought and paid for. Is it the same with human traffickers?
It can be very similar, but we're seeing in especially our area in rural Pennsylvania, we're seeing that on a smaller scale. We're seeing individuals who want to be like the bigger cartels, like the bigger gangs from larger cities, but they're acting in a way that maybe it's just a family situation, or a small gang type, or just an individual who has access to other individuals that become victims of their trafficking.
Okay. And I want to reiterate, this is going on literally under our noses here. Is that because of the highways that come through this area, 15, 80, 220?
We're part of an organization called Path 15. It's the Pennsylvania Alliance Against the Trafficking of Humans, and it has to do with how victims are trafficked on Route 15. And if you've ever traveled Route 15, it's a very beautiful, scenic path, and it's very deceiving, but there's so many adult bookstores, and there's so many.
Right.
You get to the end where you turn on 322 and Duncannon, and there's approximately 13 plus gentlemen's clubs, strip clubs, new girls places, and that's where many of these victims are being sold for sex. They're being trafficked.
When we say victims, what age group are we talking about for potential human trafficking victims?
It can be any age group, but primarily what we're looking at is talking about minors. These are not individuals that one day woke up and said, gee, today I think I'm going to go prostitute myself. I think I'm going to go sell myself for sex.
Yeah.
These are individuals that one way or another were attracted to the promise of a life that there's, and maybe we'll get into later when we talk about some of the behaviors and the warning signs, but these individuals are sort of what they call the throwaway kids. They're usually runaways. They're from dysfunctional homes. They have seen or been involved in serious abuse cases. There's just a lot going on with their home that they're
not being cared for. Really.
Correct. And to quote a corny country song, they're looking for love in all the wrong places.
Okay.
And so when someone comes into their life that's telling them what they want to hear and is showing them affection and complimenting them, it's very easy for young minds to be molded to think that this is an individual, a strong love interest, potential boyfriend or husband material even.
And even somebody in their own family can be the...
somebody they know and love and trust, and that is doing this to them. We've talked to survivors who have shared with us that they've been basically groomed to perform and be sold for sex from the time they were born.
I'm sure there are laws on the books at this point, at least some. What legislation is already in place before we look at what, the new initiatives that are going on?
This is Anne.
Okay, Anne,
One
Michael.
of the important pieces of legislation besides Act 105 that helped to define human trafficking here in Pennsylvania is the Safe Harbor Bill. And that decriminalized minors who were caught up in the commercial sex industry. So instead of being treated as a criminal, arrested, prosecuted, and put in jail, minors are now considered victims of human trafficking, and then they receive services so that they can have their lives restored to one of dignity, and to have the kinds of things provided for them, especially trauma counseling is extremely important. And so that law went into effect in January of this year, and that's been really important in addressing the issues that Heather was talking about in regard to minors who are so vulnerable to wanting a relationship, and that's what oftentimes draws them into the commercial sex enterprise.
I would think if you do manage to get away from your trafficker, it must be an awfully difficult thing to put your life back together. And I would think also, if you escape, they're going to be looking for you.
This is true. This is Heather.
Okay.
Again, the agency that I work for is, as I mentioned, a comprehensive crime victim center, but we work a lot with domestic violence and sexual assault victims. And so when you have a victim of trafficking, obviously there's been sexual assault and there's been violence. So we're able to try to assist with the variety of resources that we're able to provide as far as counseling. It's very difficult, though, to work with a victim because of the relationship that the victim has had in the past with the trafficker, thinking that this trafficker is someone that they can trust, that they can love, that loves them, that is only doing this because there's no other choice, and this is how they show their love. Many of these victims do not want to come forward, and they will not give anybody in authority any information about their trafficker to get that individual in trouble. It's Stockholm Syndrome. It's this connection that Elizabeth Smart had with her kidnappers. It's a description of, I still want to protect this individual even though they hurt me horribly and terribly, did these things to me, but there's still some sort of connection that you can hear in their voice when they're talking to you about even the most minute information that they care to give up to you. So it's very difficult, and our numbers are very, our statistics are very questionable in some cases, because there'll be a victim that will be recovered, and that victim may want to come forward and share as much information as possible, but then that victim is telling us, well, there's 3 to 4 to 5 other girls that are in that situation in that house that are not coming out, that are not going to give you any information, and so you're only getting one individual at that time. And you know that there's others who are not coming forward out of fear, out of threats, out of just, we've had individuals say fear of the known, knowing what's going to happen to them, beats fear of the unknown, because when they're thrown back out into society and there's no one there to help them adjust or be a support system for them, it's very difficult for them to cope and adapt, and many of them have turned to drug addictions and other addictions to help deal with the situations that they're being faced with.
How do we protect our kids from this? What are the things to look for?
Education. We have to educate everybody. We have to bring as much awareness and as much information about this topic as possible. And we're not exaggerating the situation just for effect. These are things that, I have to tell you, when I first became involved in understanding about this, it was several years ago, and I sat there thinking, I'm a pretty perceptive person. And I've looked around my community and I don't see any signs of trafficking, but I had the only definition that I knew trafficking to be, and that was from the movies and Taken and things like that. And when I really started to get a grasp on what the actual definition of trafficking was and how it was affecting our communities of North Central Pennsylvania, I realized there have been things that I have seen that I have questioned that I just kind of let go because I didn't identify it as trafficking. I identified it as something else. And even talking to law enforcement, when we do trainings to them, they're very clear on the fact that they needed to be educated also, and they needed to understand how to respond to some of these calls and call it what it is.
All 4 of you are involved in organizations who engaged in the fight against human trafficking. So, Dawn Blanchard and Ann Judd, why don't you talk a little about Born to Fly and what you do in connection with them?
All right, this is Dawn, and I became interested and aware of this problem because in the 80s we hired a children's worker for our church that we just thought was dynamic and could really get kids to do whatever he wanted them to do. He was magic with children. And we found out that he was handling our children improperly and was going throughout the neighborhood and actually had full sex with a Down syndrome child in our neighborhood. And so my husband ended up being the chief witness for the prosecution to have this man put in jail. This was before Megan's Law. We just heard about 5-6 years ago that this man is now in New York. He's doing the same things, the same operations that he always did to get kids. And they wanted my son, who was a child at the time in the Bible school, and told me what was going on, to come up and testify against this man in New York because they had no stats on him because it was before Megan's Law when these people had to be tagged. Of course, my son's now 44, and he was probably 12 at the time, and he said, "I don't want any part of that, Mom." I mean, it was so devastating to him as a young child. So I've been a nurse for 40 years. I retired from nursing in 2016, and I said my doctoral dissertation was on how to keep middle school children healthy. And what in their perspective could we do as a society to keep them healthy? And one of the things was they wanted safe ways to be close to others. They wanted friendships, they wanted deep friendships, they wanted somebody to know and care where they were at the end of the day. And how we do that in a healthy manner was the theme of my doctoral dissertation. Anyway, I thought, I love kids, I want kids to be safe, and I had this traumatic experience with sex trafficking, or sexual predator anyway.
Yeah.
And so, interestingly, I was teaching nursing at Messiah College at the time, and Ann Michael's brother was starting International Justice Mission. And why in the world the university ever chose me to go down and be a representative for Messiah, because I don't even think they knew, except they knew I was a maternal child nurse. Maybe that was why. Anyway, they sent me down, and I was privileged to be at the reception of the opening of the International Justice Mission in Washington, D.C. And then I thought, well, what can I do now that I'm retired and I have all this experience? And I heard about Born to Fly through a minister in town here, Angelique Labadie, and I can't say her last name, Chinowitz or whatever. She's hyphenated. And I went with her the summer of 2017 and ran a Born to Fly camp. I watched them do it. And then Ann and I went to Lewisburg, and Ann got turned on to what we could do about sex trafficking, and we came together and we went online. If anybody is interested in doing Born to Fly in their church, in their scout troop, anywhere kids gather, even a neighborhood, if a mother has a nice big living room and she wants to have a group of 6 of her daughter's girlfriends, we'll come in and do Born to Fly, or you can get the materials yourself online.
You'll do presentations, though, at all these places. Okay.
The best way to do them is 5 consecutive days or 5 consecutive weeks on one day. Give the kids time to digest a little bit, talk with mom and dad about what they're hearing, because it's a very intense subject. However, we do it in a very child-friendly way, and Ann Judd will talk about that in a minute, but I wanted to say the reason that Diana Scamone started Born to Fly was she was a newspaper or a magazine reporter, and she was on assignment to find out about sex trafficking overseas, which Heather says that's pretty much what we think. And she was in Mumbai, India, and the man was giving her a tour, and she says, "What are in those cages up there?" He said, 5-year-old girls.
Oh.
And then he proceeded to tell her that for 30 days, they do horrendous things to these little 5-year-olds so that they're broken, so that they're good to be sold. And Diane said, that's it. And she quit her job and she started Born to Fly. Because she says it's good to rescue girls, but she said, what I want is to keep children from ever getting in those cages.
I have to say, it's almost hard for me to wrap my head around the evil that we're dealing with here. And Judd, talk about your involvement in Born to Fly, and specifically maybe how it relates to Lycoming County, and how did you get involved in the fight against human trafficking?
Well, like I said before, Dawn Blanchard got me involved, and she and I decided to start a camp, which we did our first camp last summer, and we try to get into the schools and educate teachers and students, and we go to First Friday events and church events and fairs and set up these little tables with just information and just trying to get the information out as much as we can. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the camps that we have, and like Dawn said, we do it for five sessions. And each day has a principle that we focus on. Its choices have consequences, and the second one is to know who your true friends are. So it's important to know who you can trust, and to be able to discern if someone is pretending to be a friend. That's very important and part of our education. And then we focus on the fact that they are unique, valuable, and worth loving, and that it's important to be patient and work hard and wait for the right time for their dreams to come true, and to not, be quick to say, oh, well, here's a job I can do. If somebody offers them something that looks too good to be true, if somebody offers them to take them, oh, we can get you a lot of money. You can make a lot of money doing this. That's a sign. That's a danger sign. So it's important for them to be patient, to work hard and wait for the right time for them to follow their dreams. And then the last point is that you are born to fly, and don't settle for less. And the way that we do this is we use a story about a caterpillar who has a dream, but she gets lured away from her dream by dream thieves. And they try to harm her and to steal her dreams. And through a series of events that she goes through, she realizes that she is valuable, and that she learns the value of waiting. And she eventually does achieve her dream, and she turns into a butterfly that she was created to be. So we tell the story in pieces each day, and we have crafts and just do it in a very...
Nothing like a story to get their interest.
Yep.
I'm 66 and I still love a good story.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
as you can hear, these folks are available. Should you want, as we're recording this, it is April of 2019. Summer's not that far away, and I'm thinking for an adult Sunday school or any Sunday school program over the summer. I know a lot of times churches tend to not to do Sunday school for the summer, but I guess you'll come anytime, won't you? Doesn't matter
Yes.
what time of year.
Yes.
And Lou, we have a Christian version of our camp and a secular version. If somebody is a
Okay.
scout leader and they maybe don't want really to push any religion, we do have a secular version.
Okay. And how do people, if they want to learn more about this, is there a website or an address they can
We have a
they can go to?
Facebook page,
Okay.
and it's Born to Fly Railway. That's the name of our particular. I'm on Railway Street,
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
so it's Born to Fly Railway. That's our page.
With the number 2. Born
to
to
fly, number two fly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So do a search for BORN, the number 2 FLY Railway on Facebook, and they should find you. Okay.
And there's lots of good information. I post almost every other day, so they can see who's the latest predator in town. And we keep up with the Sun Gazette and the educational facilities. Like, there's been a number of teachers, professors that have been lost their ability to teach because, and probably these parents will know who they are. So to keep up, stay on our page.
Dawn and I have often spoken about the fact that we would like to have a community-wide anti-trafficking campaign here in Williamsport or in Lycoming County. And we'd like to bring in like WAR and have IJM and Heather and people speak, but we need a sponsoring agency to endorse it and to help us with it. So if anybody's out there listening and they would like to help us with that, can get in touch with us. We'd want to bring in speakers and explain the dangers and give specific information on trafficking, and that's one of our goals that we would like to do.
This is Anne. I'd love to talk about the volunteer opportunities that are available here in Pennsylvania. IJM is a international organization. In fact, it's the largest anti-human trafficking organization in the world. And in its 20 years of existence, they have freed 49,000 slaves. And they have thrown 3,800 oppressors in jail. And they have protected over 150 million vulnerable people from violence. And that is what their mission is to protect the poor from violence, because those are the people around the world in developing countries who are prey to the bullies of the world, and their mission is to protect them from that violence. And the way that the volunteer team here in Pennsylvania helps IJM in its mission is by doing three things. We raise awareness about the problem of global slavery. Over 40 million people are currently in slavery around the world. We also raise support for IJM by inviting people to become Freedom Partners, which is a monthly designation to IJM, and through that you help to pay for the rescue of the slaves that are currently around the world. And the third thing that we do is we raise our voices in prayer. If you're interested in learning more about the volunteer opportunities, you can go to ijm.org and find out what you can do and how to get connected.
You read my mind. That was going to be my next question. Okay. Heather, anything else from you?
There's always. I can always talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So do you really want to go there with me? But anyways, Transitions of PA. We also have a website, www.transitionsofpa.org. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. There's a lot of information that we are putting out there about trafficking. I just want to say that in our experience with this, being able to identify an individual and maybe being able to reach out to a victim, mostly runaways or homeless, they're not enrolled in schools or they have truancy issue, they live with someone that they claim has taken them in or is looking after them. Many of these are mostly minor girls coming from very dysfunctional homes with a history of abuse, either witnessing abuse or being abused themselves, and it can be drug abuse or violence in the home. Low self-esteem coming from poverty, and they many times have very coached or rehearsed answers. There could possibly even be brandings or tattoos, which are the way that the trafficker presents his ownership of that individual, and in some cases will have his name tattooed on the victim with whatever work name or pet name that he has for them. In closing, I just want to mention we did work with a school district who does not confirm or deny this, but when the individual was arrested as a trafficker, he claimed that he was a guidance counselor for the school district, and that's how he had access to as many of these young girls as he did, that he basically tricked and deceived and lied to get them into his stable. There was recruiting by other girls that were part of his stable that were recruited, other girls were being recruited within the school district. So we're doing a lot of trainings and education, not only to law enforcement and to the community, but to school districts, to colleges, universities, anywhere where anyone would have access to be around individuals young. The statistics indicate that boys and girls, the age that they are lured into trafficking is between 12 and 13 years old. And right now there's over 460,000 entries for missing children in the U.S. that they fear a large number of those individuals are being trafficked. You can report if you suspect trafficking or you see something that just isn't right or doesn't feel right. Trust your gut instinct. You can report to 911. There's also Polaris, which is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And that's a real easy number to remember because it's 888-3737, 888. So that's the toll-free number. Also, we encourage people to call Childline, which is the reporting of suspected child abuse, and trafficking just became one of the categories of mandated reporting of suspected child abuse. And then, of course, the local Comprehensive Crime Victim Center, which is Transitions. You can actually call our hotline as well, which is 1-800-850-7948. We have created task force that involves local law enforcement, local detectives, county detectives, Pennsylvania State Police, children and youth. We worked with hospitals for their SANE exam for when victims come in for rape cases, juvenile probation, excuse me, vice and patrol, basic police. Almost all of these victims are exceptionally reluctant to report and go against their traffickers. They have been beaten, threatened, forced, coerced, lied to, manipulated, and are terrified to report any crime to authorities. Many have been arrested as prostitutes and charged with that crime even though they are doing this against their will. They feel hopeless and helpless and that they do not deserve anything any better. But they do, and we can help give them their lives back and end trafficking.
Dawn Blanchard, Ann Judd, Ann Michael, Heather Schneider, thank you all for being on Faith Unbound in Lycoming County.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, I did mention that it might not be an uplifting conversation, but the upside of it, I think, is that there are 4 women that we just talked to, and many, many more besides, who are doing all they can do to rescue young girls from human sexual trafficking. I thank God for them, and I thank them for their willingness to put so much of their time and effort into fighting this incredibly evil practice that is going on everywhere, including right here in our north central Pennsylvania. Dawn Blanchard and Ann Judd are with Born to Fly. The international organization is at borntofly.org. And please note that the 2 is not T-O, but the number 2. So it's fly.org for the international organization. Their local chapter can be reached through Facebook. And I found the easiest way to find them is just bring up Facebook, go to the search box, and type Born, the number 2, the word fly, Railway. Remember, Dawn said she lives on Railway Street, and that's what they named the chapter. So Born to Fly Railway, that'll show you the page, and you can like it and follow it. And that'll give you all sorts of good information, including what they are doing as a community group, and also known sexual predators that are in the area. And that is vital information if you have kids or grandkids. Ann Michael is involved with a couple of groups. The International Justice Mission. They can be found on the web at ijm.org. She is also involved with the Pennsylvania Anti-Human Trafficking Advocacy Work Group. That's an outgrowth of Act 105, which is Pennsylvania's anti-human trafficking legislation that took effect in 2014. Heather Schneider works with Transitions of PA, an organization based in Lewisburg. Their web address is www.transitionsofpa.org. And they have a toll-free hotline number that you might find useful. I certainly think it bears mentioning, 1-800-850-7948, 1-800-850-7948. And one more bit of business before we wrap up. I mentioned in Episode 3 that the UCLC website is undergoing extensive updating thanks to the students at Pennsylvania College of Technology. As I record this in early May of 2019, that project is almost complete. So keep checking in with the website. I'm sure you'll notice the changes when they are unveiled. The barking you hear is courtesy of our dog, Murky, who never seems to be able to keep quiet when I need her to. By the way, the address for the United Churches of Lycoming County website is www.uclc.org, uclc.org. Comments on the podcast can be sent to me, Lou Kolb, at loukolb@gmail.com, LOUKOLB, loukolb@gmail.com. I am Lou Kolb. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Faith Unbound in Lycoming County.